It's Thursday. Good to see you. Yes, getting to do live today early, had the day off. And so I'm hitting it. And we've got an interesting subject today. I was a little bit frustrated with some people and groups that are, serving the Lord and doing the best of what they know. And it just seems like they don't use wisdom. They are, kind of like, I only want a kindergarten's education of God, or I only want to be in the first grade. I don't really want to go any further. This is how much I want to know. I don't really want to know anything else. And God's okay with that. I mean, God's a free will God. If you want to be a child of God, you can. If you want to grow up and be a son of God who hears directly from God, then you have to advance. You have to set yourself up to gain wisdom and increase your faith and all of that. And that's who gets the inheritance. The inheritance is not for a child. The inheritance is for a son. Especially in Old Testament times, that's the way it was. Now, when God says that you're all children of God, that means you are a child of God. You have the rights of the household. But when you become a son of God, then you have a piece of inheritance in the household of God. It's a little bit more. It requires something. We don't all have time for that. We don't have time for what's required. And other people are called to it. They just, they drop everything. This is what I'm doing. I'm going all the way. Like we have a friend of ours, Jake, who's in Africa. He went to school with us, and he is just going throughout Africa and India, winning for the Lord, and miracles and signs and wonders. And but we were in the same class. How come I'm not doing that? It just depends on what your call is. So don't feel like I'm not making it. I am not good enough. No. You seek out God at your level, and receive rewards accordingly. Okay, so today we are going with the ingredients of wisdom, because honestly, a lot of people say, and even Proverbs. We're going to go to Proverbs today, just for 2 different verses, and it says, "Get wisdom, get this, get that." In Proverbs, it says, "Have this, have that, seek this, seek that." But no one ever really tells me what it is I'm seeking, what it is that causes me to have wisdom. Well, now, once I've been burned, I'm wise about not getting burned again. But why did I have to be burned? Why couldn't I have learned first? I even look at the idea of, getting caught as a child, which I did, playing with matches, playing with a lighter. It's fascinating. You watch it light. Ooh, it's really fun. But then something goes wrong. And then an adult catches a child playing with matches. Mommy and daddy catch a little boy, little girl, mostly little boys, playing with matches. And there is some discipline and consequence for that. And the child learns, okay, I'm not going to do that. But then there's that same child when they're 17 or 18 years old, and they're still playing with matches, because they didn't learn as a child that there is consequences to playing with matches. The matches were taken from them. They were told not to do that again. Don't ever do that again. Don't play with matches. But they were never really instructed on why, on understanding what happens when you play with matches. And I think that was a lot of my upbringing. My parents were strict. They were good on discipline. They didn't over-discipline. They were a little bit hard with their words, as far as, being negative and, dumb and stupid and all that kind of things. But they were not abusive when it came to physical stuff. And so there were things I didn't learn because I became more rebellious, because you're just hurting my feelings. You're just yelling at me, and you're telling me not to do this, but you're not really teaching me as a parent. So as a parent, we need to take that child by the hand and say, sweetheart, this is what happens. And so when I was working with that and working on how I wanted to communicate with you today, what I was trying to do, I was kind of getting a little judgmental. And Joy caught that pretty quickly and said, "No, you're talking wrong here, and you're being judgmental." And of course, I didn't think I was, but as soon as she said it, I could see it. And so I began to continue the study, and I came across two very tiny words. And the two very tiny words, I think I could almost make a series out of this called a series of small words. And they're usually 2 or 3 letters. And in this one, I started to, I was looking at the word consequence and understanding consequence. And of course, here comes the thing about the ingredients of wisdom is to preempt the consequence, even though you've never even been in the situation before. How do you do that? How do you have wisdom when you don't know what's going on? What clues you in? What gives you wisdom in every situation? Well, they're 2 small 2-letter words. And because I was going into consequence, and I was saying, with the matches, and I was trying to develop this teaching on playing with matches and consequences and not having the maturity and getting all wound up in that, when really it comes down to 2 letters, to and of. And at first I was saying, okay, we've got to understand these 2 small words help us with consequences, and they help us explain consequences before we even get into them. So when your child doesn't understand the consequences of playing with matches, the house is at risk, something could burn, something could be tragically ruined, or even just slightly damaged, and it's not even, with a child, of course, I'm speaking in terms of a belligerent result of consequence, but there is accidental consequences too, as far as, there's a consequence if you leave your Christmas tree in the house too long and it's all dried out. One little spark and that thing's, there's a not that kind of consequence, but the consequence that you do with rebellion, the consequence you do with ignorance. And a child doesn't understand ignorance unless you explain to them 2 things. The consequence to, which affects me, and the consequence of, or the consequence to, which is for others, and the consequence of, which affects me. And I was very lightly looking at this. The consequence to and the consequence of. Oh, I can't wait to talk to you about this. Because I was saying, okay, there is the consequence of, which affects me, and then there's the consequence to, which affects others. So at first I was saying to myself, the consequence of playing with matches towards myself, injury, problems, look what I've done. The consequence to is the home, the clothing, the countertop, something that could be damaged because of my action. And when I got to that word action, that's when it started to come together and snowball even bigger. Because when I went from consequence to and consequence of, and I started to say consequence of your action and consequence to your action, that opened up something really big I want to share with you. Because imagine, okay, let's take something simple as far as how we believe. Okay, faith. So if we say the consequence of our faith. What is a consequence of our faith? And now that sounds, consequence is a terrible word. No, it is let's just say the word results. What are the results of the action of our faith? What are the results of our action to our faith. And all of a sudden, I was starting to see something here that, how do I explain this in a simple way? Here's how I see this as an ingredient to wisdom. And if I, the other day, I said, I'm so tired of writing my password. Of forgetting my password, I'm going to write it down. Now I'm trying to remember where I wrote it down. I'm just, so it was like, that was not what I wanted. I wrote it down so I'd remember it, and now I can't remember where I wrote it down. Because you want to hide your password. Well, hide the piece of paper that my password's on. Can't find the piece of paper. So in the same way, if I was able to remember when I come into a situation that I'm unfamiliar with, if I would just say those two words, of and to, how do I act? What do I say? Well, how I act will have a consequence. Now, will this consequence of, what is the reaction? What is my action will have a consequence of towards me, and it will have a consequence towards the situation. If you can say the words of and to, what's going on here, of and to, when you come into a new situation, then you begin to see the ingredients of wisdom. Why do some people know what to do? Why do they always seem to say the right thing? How do they have this gift of coming into a situation and they know how to deal with it? I think it's because they have these ingredients within them that assess the situation immediately in the terms of, what will my action do? What will my action cause? What will I say? You have in a good situation where your neighbor, your two neighbors are arguing. If you wouldn't just bust out the door and start saying, what's going on here? What are you guys talking about? Why are you arguing? But you actually went out there and said, okay, of and to. What is the action? What is consequence of my action? And what is the consequence to this? What is the consequence to the action? And you were able to say, okay, if I interrupt them, how do I interrupt them? Do I listen to what they're arguing about? Do I already know what they're arguing about? If you have that ability to I want to say, imagine your consequence, to see your consequence, to know what it is ahead of time, just by asking yourself, instead of rushing in, just saying, okay, what's going to happen for the consequence of your action, the consequence to your action. So the consequence of your action, of going out and interrupting, and what is the consequence to your action? What is their reaction going to be back? And at that time, you might say, you know what, their reaction to me coming out there is going to be, I'm just butting in, and what business is of mine, I'm just staying here. I'm just walking on the porch and having a cup of coffee. I'm not saying anything. Now, you may not have done that if you hadn't said to yourself, what is the consequence of me interrupting their argument? That's kind of what I'm trying to get to here. That by using the of and to, you are being wise. And sometimes you don't have time, whether it's a traffic situation or something, someone pulling in front of you in traffic. You have that thought of, what is the consequence of getting road rage right now at this person in front of me? What my action, how is that going to affect the drivers around me? And you realize quickly, the wise thing is to do is just to change lanes, get away from that person. They're acting erratically. And, if it was super bad, you would just, dial 911, give them a license plate, and so that they would have a record of something. That's wisdom. Considering now, this isn't something that you can just put with one thing. I mean, I was writing down a list here, the consequences of my love, the action, the consequence of the action of my love, the consequence of faith, the results of faith, and the results of faith, and the results to faith. Because when you have an action of faith, it goes to faith. It increases your faith. It changes your faith. And it goes for the negative too. You know, if you hate something, you're thinking of hate, then you've also got to think about, okay, to hate. Of and to go together. You know, what is the consequence of hating? What is the consequence to hating? And you've even got, when you've got even your home, the consequence of your home, the consequence of your car, how you act. If you can just take a breath and say, what is the consequence? What is the results of my action before you do it? That's an ingredient of wisdom. And I was like, get wisdom. Well, what do you mean get wisdom? Get understanding. That's what Proverbs says. Get wisdom, get understanding. Okay, get from where? How do I get this wisdom? How do I get this understanding? And I believe it comes from the human ability to have an imagination, to have a pre-thought of what could happen in every situation, and not just immediately react, immediately say something. Almost like you take a moment to look at the person's face. You take a moment to look at their body language, their how they're acting, what is their emotion. And as you put these things together, you form the results of what you're about to say before you say them. This is not going to help for me to say this. I am so guilty of this because I really want to tell people, oh, you need to take that to the courts of heaven. Oh, you need to fix this. You need to talk. This needs to be healed. You need to go to God. You need healing. Don't you realize you need healing? That's not working because I'm not seeing the level of where, hey, Rhonda Gale, where it's coming from, where I'm supposed to take this. And that is an issue that I've had because, well, I'll tell you, I've turned a lot of people off because I knew what they needed to do and they didn't want to know. They didn't want to hear it. They were not ready for that. And I did that for years. And it's only been recently that I have noticed people are coming around just through prayer and a calm, peaceful, just a thought. I don't have to change them that instant. They're coming around. They're coming around. And if someone needs to be changed that instant and needs something said to them, then I have to say, okay, Jesus, you speak and you say it through me, but I'm not saying anything. Because, I have people that are like, they're in ministry or they're doing this, and yet they're doing the craziest things on the side that I don't understand. So anyhow, but I mean, here's something so silly, but it may catch your imagination or it may catch your understanding. Even think of it, even with a tree in your yard. I want to cut this tree down, or I want to change this situation. You have the consequence of cutting the tree down, and you have the consequence to cutting the tree down. And those two, if you will say that to yourself, what's the consequence of cutting this tree down? Well, it's a healthy tree. I'll lose some shade on the house. What's the consequence to, cutting this tree down? Well, I don't see, the lawn will be clean. I'll be able to mow without having to mow around the tree. You can think ahead of time because the consequence of cutting the tree down is affecting you. Consequence to cutting the tree down is more in the future. And so you have, an immediate consequence and a future consequence. And there have been people that have cut trees down not realizing those roots were holding the land in place. And when they cut those trees down, then there was a mudslide. That's what happened with the floods and fires. After the big fires burned the trees, the next year, because the roots had died, there were mudslides because the trees were holding things. We've even had mudslides in near us that we've went to vlog, and it was just a really steep hill, but unfortunately they had cleared the area to put in homes and had not considered the runoff from those homes going down the hill, and so it caused problems, which was a consequence. And the wisdom of a person would have said, now, where's the water going now that we're paving this area, now that we're putting a home here? Where is the water going that's from the parking lot and from this home and from these gutters and all of that? Where's all this water going? And so they didn't think of the consequence of putting in this home, or two, the consequence after it's in. They didn't even see how it was going to run down the hill and erode things. Ooh, the wind's picking up. So, it can be just something as simple as a tree. And when I got to that, I realized that this was a key to wisdom, of and to. To have a key to wisdom on what to do by saying the consequence of this to me right now, the consequence to this, what's going to happen in the future. If I can deal with that ahead of time, that's what I ought to do. And so if we go to, and I'm going to go to 1 Corinthians 14:20, which says, brethren, do not be children in understanding. However, in malice, be babies. So what he's saying is, be a man and be aggressive and be forthright when it comes to understanding. Be grown up. But when it comes to malice, which is, of course, being lied about, being tricked, being judged, be a baby. Like, be innocent about that. Babies don't know you're mad at them. Babies don't care that they've messed their diaper and, hey, I'm living life, I'm having a great time. But, so be a baby when it comes to that. Be a child's mind. That stay innocent. Don't be begrudging someone, judging someone. Just, hey, accidents happen. And then it also says in verse 13, it says, in chapter 13, it says, verse 11, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, and I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Interesting that he says, I spoke, I understood, and I thought. Okay, so he spoke, understood, and thought. Those three things as a child. So when you become an adult, you also do the same thing, same three things. You speak, you understand. And when you do that, let me see, where was that? Speak, understand, and think as an adult, not as a child. And this is, it's like, this is part of, okay, I'm supposed to think like an adult now. How do I do that? I've got this flesh here that's still childish. I've got this flesh, this mind, this body that's still, wants another cracker, wants to go out and play, doesn't want to sit down and do my studies. I still have to do that. What is this? How do I speak and think and act mature? And so when I found this ingredient of and to, that if I say, what is the consequence of this right now? And what is the consequence that this will go to, the consequence to this? and see the future. That gives me information to make a decision. That gives me what I need to know. And the other one was Proverbs 22:6, which I have right here with my little piece of paper. Proverbs 22:6 says, I didn't have my, there we go. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way they should go. When they're old, they will not depart from it. That's where I want to say, as an adult, as a parent, you've got to invest in those children when they're young like that. The 4 and the 5 and the 6 years old, if they're reading Proverbs, if they're getting this kind of instruction, it's going to sink in. If all they know at 4, 5, and 6 years old is wrong, 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 then they don't know what right is. You know, I used to describe my upbringing as like a car tire or a bicycle tire that you would roll down a hill, you know, just down a neighborhood street or something like that. And you would run next to it, right? And you would guide it, you know, and you'd tap it this way and you'd run next to it, you know, and you're riding the tire or whatever. And as the tire is rolling and you're moving along. And for some reason, I just had this feeling like when I was a child, my parents more or less, you know, pushed the tire down the street. And if it hit something, if it fell over, they would pick it up and push it again, you know, spank it and pick it up and push it again and say, see what you did wrong, and then push it again and let it keep going. And a parent should be with the child, guiding and touching and leading, and not just waiting for the child to crash and burn and say, look what you did wrong, look how dumb, look what you've done. They wouldn't have done that had you been next to them, guiding them as they go. And so I kind of had that example in my mind that, you know, and it's not like I had these terrible parents. They were just busy with their own lives, busy in their own thoughts, in their own careers. There was, you know, sometimes 4 children at home, for sure 2, and they just didn't have a lot to do with us. We were raised by television. We were raised by circumstance. And it was like when we crashed and burned, oh yeah, then we got a paddling, then we got a spanking, you know, but other than that, there wasn't a lot else going on except, you know, but see, this was the 70s and the 80s when parents were just off doing their thing and expecting school and other things to raise their children right. And they did not realize that school and children wasn't raising their children right, because they were raised right when they were kids. They were raised by good parents that were farmers and gone all day, and they worked and participated in the lives of their parents. And so they thought that, you know, giving us more freedom than they had when they were children, oh, I want my child to have it better than I had it, was not a good idea. And let's see, 16:14 Proverbs. I wanted to end with this. Wisdom doesn't just happen. You have to get it. The Bible says you have to get wisdom, you have to get understanding. It doesn't just come. Now, when you have an incident and an accident, you do get wisdom on that situation. But the ingredients to wisdom is before the situation happens. What is the consequence to selling this? What is the consequence of selling this? You know, things like that. Just it's so easy to say. What's the results of doing this? What's the results of to me? What's the results to my family? When I was more narcissistic and more selfish, I pretty much did what I wanted, and my wife understood and went along with a lot of the things that I did, and jobs and doing this and things like that. Because that's just, you know, I was aggressive and I was going forth and I was making a living, and she went along a lot with all of that. But there was a day when she said to me, and she put her foot down and she said, now we're going to go to Bible college. We're going to go to Bible college. And we had a minister come and minister, and he was going to start a Bible college. And she says, I want to go, and we're going to do this. And for some reason, the way she said it about why we would go and what we would get, it all made sense to me. Because I didn't want to go. I had a good job. I had something happening, maybe good pay. We had low rent, low utilities, a place of our own. Why would I want to give all this up? And yet, that was something that, okay, I've been doing what I want to do. I want to do, but I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this. She had never really spoken up. And, other than birthdays, we're going to my mother's birthday party. We're going to Thanksgiving. We're going, when she would say, okay, we're going and we're doing this, with family. Because I wasn't much of a family person, with my background.
And he was a bah humbug.
And I was a bah humbug at Christmas because I'd been in the military and I'd been in Antarctica for Christmas. So I never valued anything, because I didn't want to be hurt when I didn't get to have it. Don't expect anything, and then you're not upset when you don't get it. Well, I was, so that's when, in the same way, my wife basically said, the results to going to Bible college, the results of going to Bible college, the results to going to Bible college were the results I wanted, which was way beyond schooling. But I wanted to be in ministry. I wanted to be involved with people and with the Lord. And she said, these are the results of going to school. She didn't say, we're going to school, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. Because that wasn't working. She said the results of doing this is we will be pregnant with the call of God. The results, the consequence of doing this is that we will birth a new ministry, the life of working with God, working for God. We will birth it if we go to college, if we go to school, and that's what worked with me. And that was wisdom, to use the right way of looking at things, to not think of it. And even with, Rhonda Gale, are we allowed to say names? One of our viewers, is going through a hard time and having to move, but yet it's birthing in her more maturity. It's birthing in her a greater worth in this world. As she's helping her mom and going through this, she's going to see one of the results of everything she's growing through is great accomplishment.
Like she's able to see her own value a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like maybe, how important she is.
Yeah, she's important to her mom now. She used to be her mom's daughter, but now she's part of being taking care of her mom, and then having all of this moving and everything coming into the middle of it is bringing out things that she probably didn't want to do. I mean, who wants to move? Who wants to pack up? But taking the responsibility and moving in that direction is something to be proud of, something you can say you did. You won't be afraid. And then you get to watch God move too, because you don't really get to watch God move in a box. But when it's time to get out of that box and when it's time to move, you get to see God do things.
Yeah, nothing ever changes. When nothing ever changes around you, you don't get to experience a level of faith where you're trusting God and seeing what He can do for you.
Mm-hmm.
But when something changes, whether it's you deciding to move forward and change, or whether it's a forced change where it wasn't really your decision, but it's God's allowing it and saying,
like happened to us,
time to change.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, God is opening up a door
Opportunity.
where you have to put your faith out there and be able to, and then you're able to watch Him come through and answer those prayers.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, just imagine if it wasn't just, I mean, imagine that you have to sell your house and you gotta leave, you know, and what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You gotta put all your stuff somewhere. You know, that's what we went through. And we've seen God move ever since. When we had to move and we had to pack everything in trailers and then move those trailers to Alabama and then move those trailers from Alabama up here to the mountains, you know, and all of the things involved with everything we've gone through in the last 5 years, it has brought us to this place where God is now bringing us into where He wants us to be. And I'm not saying we couldn't have been here sooner if we hadn't had more, if I'd had more wisdom and understanding and patience and things like that. But, you know, I was not paying attention, not using wisdom. We could have been here sooner. We could have done better than this, but God worked it out with exactly the way it is, and it's happening now. And so anyway, I wanted to share that with you.
Nancy said, yes, even when we don't understand, God's moving in the background.
God's moving. And
Rhonda Gale's getting snow today.
Oh.
And
well,
she's thankful she doesn't have to shovel it.
And you're not moving furniture today. Good thing. I remember having to move with my parents, moved out of their house on January 2nd, you know, of 1970 or 69. January 2nd of 1969. And it was 2 degrees. Can you imagine moving when it's 2 degrees? Phew, who does that? But people didn't think about that back then. Everybody worked hard. All right. So anyway, thank you for being with me today. I love you very much and enjoyed you being here. So say hi to Jimmy, hi to Rhonda, everybody else that came in. I can't see the screen, so
Nancy.
and Nancy, of course. Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate those of you that have the time to spend with us.
And the other people that are watching.
And by
right
people
now
by television, people by replay.
People that are watching but not chatting in.
We thank you so much for being here. And I hope these ingredients of wisdom that you can sit there and say the consequence of and the consequence to, the result of, the result to, before you make that decision will help you today, even today. And you needed to hear this. And I'm just telling you, I'm excited. I'm just hoping I remember to do it. Love you very much. Good day, good day, good day. Do I need to keep it?